Jesus was known to have a little bit of a beef with the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, bunch of legalists, and he talks about them in the 23rd chapter of Matthew, verses 1 through 4. He says this, "Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, 'The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must obey them and do everything they say.'" In other words, follow their teachings, follow their verbal teaching. And then he says this, "But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy loads and put them on men's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move." The teacher you want is the guy who practices what he preaches, not a bunch of hypocrites who teach you to do something, but they don't do it, okay? That's what he's talking about. There's a lot of that kind of stuff going around in what's called the Christian community and other places, okay? Practice what you preach. I was thinking about an old story. This is a preacher story. Young preacher took a little country church, his first church, and he got up after a few weeks and preached a sermon about giving. Tithing, you need to tithe, Everybody should tithe. He said, you tithe so you can support me. I don't have to tithe, but you tithe because you need to support me, so that I can be your preacher. You take care of me. But I don't tithe. So the next week, this old elder in the church, a businessman, gave him a call, said, "I want to meet you for lunch." So he met him downtown for lunch. And the old elder kind of put his arm around him and said, "Son, I need to talk to you." Okay. He said, "The sermon you preached Sunday was way off track. What you need to always do, don't ever ask anyone to do something that you don't do. Okay? You ask people to pray, you ought to be a guy who prays. You ask people to study the Bible, you ought to be a guy who studies the Bible. You ask people to tithe, you need to be a guy who tithes. It's not just about what you teach, it's about what you practice. Power comes when a guy practices what he preaches and becomes an example for other people to follow. In fact, you know what the Apostle Paul did? He said, "Follow my example as I follow Christ." That's what we need to do. We need to practice what we preach. Everybody, not just the preacher, okay? I've always tried to practice what I preach because otherwise you rob the message of its power. Follow folks who practice what they preach. And when you get an opportunity to preach to someone or to teach someone, practice what you preach. Hope you'll hang on to that. Hope you'll subscribe to my channel and hit the bell so you'd get notified every time I put something out. Bless your heart. Have a great day.